In this episode, we talk to Nick Westergaard. Nick is a teacher at the University of Iowa. He is the chief brand strategist at Brand Driven Digital, the host of the On Brand podcast, a regular contributor to Harvard Business Review, Forbes, and many others. He is a two-time author, and we have Nick on today to talk about his second book, Brand Now. We talk about brands living in the minds of consumers, the Starbucks Day of Training, which recently happened, brands that take risks and create memorable touch points, and Kirker Picard. So, hope you enjoy. My name is Colin Finkle, and we'll see you on the other side.
Okay, Nick, welcome to Brand Marketing Blog. You have the
Thank
distinction
you. I'm
of
happy
being
to be
our
here.
first video interview.
I'm on right here. I'm first.
So, first off, we like to ask everybody, what does the term brand mean to you?
So you start with a nice, easy softball.
Yeah, just a little narrow question.
Well, it's funny because I having a podcast about branding myself, I ask this question a lot, and I've compiled the answer. So I'm worried that my answer will be sullied or stolen from someone else. But I'm a fan of the Jeff Bezos classic of what people say when you're not in the room, the emotional aftertaste that you leave with someone. Really, I think what all of those have in common are that the brand is what is left behind, the emotion that someone feels, as opposed to as opposed to anything that we are broadcasting at someone, and that automatically becomes the brand. It is oftentimes what we're left with as the audience, and that's why it's so much more than just the 30-second ad. It is the customer service experience someone has in your store. It is the experience filling out the order form on your website. It is what your employees are wearing. There's so many different touch points that set off that brand experience, and what you're left with at the end of the day, after the fact, is what the brand is. It's why, United would love it if their brand was about flying the friendly skies, but for most of us, United is about dragging people off of flights and killing dogs.
Yeah, it's funny when you cruise a store thing with someone that's not in the marketing industry, and they seem to have some sort of idea that we have some perfect control, subtle, like hidden messages or something. And I'm like, the consumer has more power over the brand than the marketer, because the brand lives in their heads. It's not something that can be perfectly conveyed through the communications of the brand or the packaging or whatever. Like, we don't have mind control yet.
Yeah, not. Yeah, I like that you tossed the yet on there. It adds that level of fright and Big Brother that so many think of marketing as well. So
yeah. For people who don't know Nick Westergaard, what brought you to branding?
what brought me to branding? I would say I started in, speaking of all of the different experiences people have with a brand, I started in customer service for a small educational publishing company many years ago, and literally it was a publishing company in the early internet days, so we were still sending out a lot of direct mail. So what I always like to say is that I literally started in the mailroom, because we would prep out massive direct mail envelope trifold type of pieces that were going out with a business reply card in them. So that was kind of my advanced direct marketing degree. And then, of course, as the internet came into being, all of that direct marketing became all of that direct mail became internet-focused direct marketing using the first e-commerce website for the company, which I helped build, and email marketing. So, and through digital marketing and through mastering all of these different channels in digital, I came to realize that what's behind it all, despite all of these shifts, is the brand behind the digital marketing megaphone. So I think that that's what led me to that. I don't know, higher calling might sound a little lofty, but
But
of the
definitely
brand.
chasing what's below all of these tactics and going more for the strategic brand marketing.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, what prompted you to write your book, Brand Now, like right now?
Right now, well, it's interesting because I wrote my first book, Get Scrappy, Smarter Digital Marketing for Businesses Big and Small. Now, with the video show here, I could point out these visual
Nice.
aids behind me.
Nice.
Um, but a little shameless, but I'll go with nice. Um, in my first book, Get Scrappy, I talk about branding in the very first chapter for the same reason that I was just talking about, because before you can do more with less with these new digital marketing tools, it's important to understand your brand, who you are, and what you stand for. But a funny thing happened in writing that chapter. All of the other chapters in Get Scrappy were very clear, concise, and relatively short. That branding chapter quickly bloated up to being about 2 or 3 times as long as all of the other chapters. So I took a moment and saw that one of these things is not like the other, the old elementary Sesame Street lesson there, and set that big bloated chapter aside and recast that as a scrappy brand. And that was my first inclination that I might have more to say on the topic of branding. Now, in that time, I was also called upon to teach the branding courses for a semester here at the University of Iowa, where I teach, where a colleague went on sabbatical. So that prompted me to use a little framework of that chapter that I had and to flesh that out. And that thinking became that is Brand Now, which is all about how to build a standout brand in this crowded, distracted world that we find ourselves in.
Well, it couldn't be more timely because I'm feeling that small to medium sized businesses particularly have more tools and at a cost that they can afford to get their logos and their websites and videos and tutorials all designed, written, produced. But that with all those tools, I'm finding a lack of meaning of brands, especially for those smaller brands. What do you think?
Well, I think it's funny because with smaller brands, a lot of times we grapple with, oh, we don't have all the resources that a larger brand has. But in many cases, I think what you trade off sometimes, and some aren't happy with the trade, but I think it's something, is that you can exert more control over the brand. I mean, I talking more about my first job at the publishing company, but as I realized in kind of taking over different aspects of the brand with digital marketing, that we could easily exert control since we owned all of those touch points. It was a small entrepreneurial company, about 30 people at the time, and we could create a very unique brand experience. That was is something is still an advantage that I think many small businesses have if they leverage it.
Yeah, I suppose I never thought about this, but I suppose you see the big companies that we think of synonymous with brand like Procter and Gamble. They don't just have the Procter and Gamble brand. They break it up into smaller brands that are of a manageable size. Also because different brand, like you're not going to have the same brand for toothpaste as you are going to be for antiperspirant, but I suppose it makes it also a little more manageable. So small to medium sized businesses have that baked into the cake already, that scale advantage.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a scale advantage, but I think, kind of flipping that script and looking at what you can do when you can exert control over some of those things that those other big cumbersome companies might not be able to pivot quite as effectively to.
Hmm. 5 orbits to your brand solar system. Can you tell us about those?
You're talking about the various circles of community.
Hmm.
Yes. Well, community is something that I talk about as one of the brand now dynamics. And concentric circles, I used to have them on my whiteboard back there because I mention them so frequently, but concentric circles can be amazing tools for organizing your brand's community as well. And like any concentric circles, we start on the inside. And the inside, the inner circles, are your employees and how you can transform those employees into better, more effective brand ambassadors. And I think that's an important place to start because too often we jump all the way out to the outer circle of customers. What your employees do, how they comport themselves is so important. Case in point, we just talked about United Airlines. There were employees delivering that service that were a little questionable.
Hmm.
And another example from a brand that I love that was a controversy that they turned around, and I think it ended up being an opportunity for them to learn in this circle, is Starbucks, which recently came under fire for having 2 black men arrested.
Hmm.
And instead of the traditional crisis response or maybe of trying to just advertise over it, showing, kind of the "we embrace diversity" type of ad that people would see. They're doing something that's much harder. They're shutting down their shops for a day to
Hmm.
engage in um, training to help avoid issues like this. But that's my full circle way of coming back and saying that's taking care of that inner circle of making sure that your employees, that inner circle, is living the brand and everything that they say and do. Now, before we jump to the outer circles, I also point out um, that there is a forgotten middle circle of other people that are a part of your brand as well, that are a powerful middle layer. In many cases, they help you deliver that service. Those are your strategic partners, vendors, other alliances you might have there as well. So, in a great example of this is IKEA. In states where they don't have a store, they have shipping partners. But those shipping partners, instead of just being external vendors, are all trained on what IKEA calls the IKEA way or I way. So they are able to deliver that service in a way that is consistent with the rest of the IKEA brand experience.
Hmm. Yeah, coming back
So
to
finally,
the.
we get out to
Oops,
those
sorry.
outer circles.
No,
Sure.
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say
Oh, I was just
with
going.
the Starbucks example, when seems like when these brands face crisis as well, everybody who's been married for more than 5 minutes knows that the first step to resolving an argument is saying, you know what I did was wrong. I've learned. Uh, I know what I'm gonna do next time better. Whereas these brands seem to stay on their haunches and just say, "Yeah, no, there was no mistake here. It was just an unfortunate event." And it
Uh,
as people that are interacting with the brands, you're like, "How do I know you're not? This isn't just going to happen again. This isn't what you are."
well, and I agree with everything you just said, and honestly, it's why I like. I don't know if Starbucks enjoys when people talk about what was a bad day for them so much, but I think the way they handled it is so commendable and it's so easy to forget. And we talk about these train wrecks like United all the time. Uh, but for the very reason that you said, they're doing the hard stuff, not only closing shops for a day of training,
Hmm.
but that first statement that they made is so unlike most of the other
Hmm.
carefully parsed corporate speak out there we are reviewing the situation and certainly wouldn't. It was quite simple. I'm paraphrasing, but I feel like I'm very much within the ballpark. It basically said, "This is bad. We need to fix it."
Hmm.
And so often, it's that real connection in the response. And I talk about brand now in moments of crisis management also. Uh, um, but it's so easy to miss these things, and so often what we're looking for is just that real human response and saying, "Wow, we messed up. We're going to try to do better." You're not even committing to anything,
Yeah.
but that's still scary for some. So, yeah.
Yeah, I don't like we are hardwired to have relationships with people, and everything that makes branding work, I assume, is because of that wiring that we're meant to deal with people. That's why brands have personality. But then brand behavior that you wouldn't put up with if they were a human, it's just unfortunate. But I mean, opportunities are bred out of when everybody's doing the same thing. So hats off to Starbucks for bucking the trend and taking a risk there. I
Absolutely.
sort of derailed you on the five concentric circles. I think we were on best customers.
Yes. So if we start at the inside with employees, we work out to our strategic partners and vendors. Finally, we're at the outer circle, which is the customers that we focus on. But too often we think homogeneously about these customers as well. And I think it's important to think about that first, the inner outer circle of your best customers. How can you treat them differently? How can you bring them into the fold and make them better brand ambassadors, just like we're trying to do with our employees as well? Uh, from there, we have our more transactional customers, and the outermost circle we have our prospects, and I bring them up at the very end because too often those imaginary people that are all the way on the outside, all the way out on the periphery, are the people that we're thinking about first, and we haven't thought about any of those people that are in our business day in, day out, our employees, our vendors, and those best customers that we're interacting with constantly. This is a smaller group, and sometimes it's scary to think about that smaller group because it feels like an off sample that we shouldn't be taking.
Hmm.
But those are the people that are there day in, day out, and are a great group to get your arms around and embrace as you think about your organization's people power.
Hmm. Well, I think it's a powerful model because it can be a little daunting when you think of converting a cold prospect into your best customer. But just taking someone from uh, one circle and moving them one more into the core of your brand, close to the commitment level that your employees and vendors hopefully have, that seems a lot more attainable. It seems to be easier to make a prospect into a transactional customer and make your transactional customers into your best customers.
Well, yeah, I mean, anything sounds daunting when you look at it from um, point A to point Z.
Hmm.
But if you think about A to B to C to D to all of those different steps, it becomes something that feels much more doable as well.
One of the most powerful things I have my clients do is take an inventory of their touch points, and they end up finding something that they may have missed or may have thought was unimportant, which actually can be quite a delightful piece of their brand. You have some uh, pretty interesting examples of touch points like leveraged in fun and unique ways that really make the brands of the that are featured in your book.
Sure. Well, I think there's so many different touch points, and it can be dangerous to get into kind of checklist land with all of the different brand touch points. So I think what is key is to think about which touch points are most important for your brand. And that gets back to understanding who you are, what you stand for, and what service you're providing, and what position in the hearts and minds of your customers you're meeting. So, for example, Zappos is not just about selling shoes online. It is about providing an exceptional level of customer service. Now, their phone calls with their sales reps or with their customer service reps are legendary. They'll stay on the phone with you while you're trying something on, talk through different colors, different things. But they also do the same thing via email as well. And customer service emails aren't a marketing touch point people think about a great deal. But when I had a sole on a pair of boots of mine start to peel off, I sent them an email because that's the channel that was convenient for me. I also, talking on the phone for whatever reason, is not my favorite thing in the whole wide world. But I got back this delightful email that I include in the book because it was such a fun moment. And it was, first of all, wrapped up in all of this is good service. Because most of the time when you have to return something, hey, there's a defective product, that's an awful experience for you as a customer anyways. Mm-hmm. But a lot of times they make you say, okay, go find the box. And if it was a week ago, I've already broken down and recycled that box. And then they say, hey, go print off this piece of paper, then cut out the return shipping label, and then look for some tape to affix the shipping label to the thing, and then go find a drop box, and hopefully it's a big enough UPS drop box to be able to fit the shoe box back into. So there's all this work. So they lead off with the fact that, hey, you've been through enough. Just keep the defective merchandise. So that's a great win. But then they add on there, feel free to keep it, donate it, or turn it into an art project. And that is maybe not the most humorous joke anyone else has heard, but it made me laugh at the moment. It brought a smile to my face because I thought not only did they turn this into a customer service win, they brought a smile to my face. So hats off to Zappos and that interesting touch point that was a simple customer service email.
Yeah, reading through your book and going through all the case studies, which I'm always super happy when I see case studies in books because it kind of gets us out of the theoretical and what actually is working in the real world. It seems like in all the case studies, there seems to be a moment where the brand, the company decides not to do something in a way that doesn't make the perfect business sense, but it makes perfect human sense.
Right. I mean, that was definitely a theme that cropped up. I know that was a story I share specifically about BarkBox. It was like they had some fun. They're, of course, selling dog toys and appealing to dog owners, or as they call them, dog parents, which is an important part of their brand DNA, that label there. And on their social media calendar, we have Throwback Thursdays, we have all these different things. And they thought about Hump Day in the workplace means one thing, but if your business is dogs, Hump Day might inspire some creative visuals that some people might raise an eyebrow at. And they thought, we're going to hear about this. People aren't going to be happy if we show photos of dogs enjoying Hump Day, as a dog might. And they knew that, but they also said it makes us laugh. So if it makes us laugh, then there's a pretty good chance it's going to make our customers laugh too. So it's one of those leap of faith moments. Some people might be listening to that and thinking, oh my gosh, that sounds like a horrible idea. All the more reason not to do it. But I think that's where you can find those standout moments are by taking a chance like that.
Mm-hmm. What I remember clearly is the Caldwell Banker story where they tell everybody about, I think it was a San Francisco earthquake in the early 20th century, and they said where there was all of these real estate firms playing on people's fears and the volatility in the market, and the Coldwell Banker got their footing by saying, no, we're going to help people out in a tough time, even if it's not the best thing for the bottom line.
And I think, like that's, I love it's their brand storybook where they share about that everybody gets from day one. But that's another good example. We've talked about some creative choices that we can make, zigging where others are zagging. And that's a great example because in the wake of the earthquake, everybody in real estate was being pretty shady in San Francisco. And that would have probably been the easier thing to do. It's what everybody else is doing. It probably would have been the faster buck to make. But they decided to do something different. And I think that's why we're sitting here today, 100 years later, talking about Coldwell Banker as a brand that still exists and not any of those other shady firms as well.
Okay, speaking of brands that people are passionate about, who is your ultimate Star Trek Enterprise captain?
Oh, I saw this in your pre-show questions, and I feel like it might have had a parenthetical saying like something like, "There's only one answer," and I thought, I don't know. I would say, I mean, I think that's why Kirk and Picard are so wonderful, because I think we both want to be like that. I think we both want Kirk days and we both want Picard days. We want to charge ahead and be the one that gets into the fight and makes the bold decisions. But I think we also like being the thinker too. I think the original series, which for the most part is probably my favorite, is so great because though the crew was bigger, it was really a show about Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. And I think that those three personalities, we've all got rattling around up here. I was a psych major, so I probably overthought who was the id, ego, and super ego of that triumvirate.
Yeah, well, I like your little hedge there about naming both captains. The correct answer is Picard, by the way. He's my captain, I should say. He's the correct answer for me. There are plenty of people in the world, and those people are free to be wrong.
Yeah, well, I could have gone with my pivot that could have gone first officers, because that's tough too, because I don't know if I could decide between Spock and Riker.
Yeah.
But Riker is my celebrity doppelganger, so you can't beat two takes Frakes.
Yeah, well, he's nice having a celebrity doppelganger because they sort of soften the market for you. You can
there you go.
Get that recognizability right off the bat. It's like, hey, weren't you on the Enterprise?
I wish. I'm just in branding and marketing.
Well, I think your book is full of them, but I'm going to ask a question we ask everybody. What other advice would you have for a fellow marketer or business owner that's fighting the good fight?
That's fighting the good fight. I'll pivot to one of my favorite questions. As a teacher and a consultant, I'm full of questions, probably exhaustively so. But if there's one simple set of questions that you can ask that I think is incredibly instructive, it's where are you now and where do you want to be? Because I think that is helpful in getting you from point A to point B. I also think that is a useful way to think about branding. Because a lot of us think about branding as a discrete task. We take part in it, it's done, we move on to the next thing. We figure out Snapchat or podcasting or something else. But branding is really like a flag that we plant off in the distance that we are always striving towards, that we are always working to get from point A to point B. So that's why asking yourself, where am I now, is key, because if you're on brand, off brand, and if you are off brand, you know what direction you need to move towards as well.
Nice. I think it's my favorite answer to that question, actually.
Awesome.
If people want to discuss the book with you or stay in touch, where can they reach out? Where can they follow you?
Yes, I am Nick Westergaard, and that's Westergaard with 2 A's on most social networks. You can also go to nickwestergaard.com. Again, 2 A's for the price of 1. And if spelling Westergaard is challenging, I would direct you to brandnowbook.com.
Awesome. Well, thanks for your time, Nick, and hopefully we'll catch you up with you at the next book behind you, when you add that next book to the behind you, or maybe before then.
Awesome. Thank you.
If you found value in this episode, consider sharing, and subscribing. Head over to brandmarketingblog.com for more insights. To support future content, download one of our tools for free or for a small donation. Tools like the Multiply Method, an Excel sheet that helps you generate 10 to 25 brand names for your organization or product. Thanks. See you next time.